Hello to all of you. We're going to get started. I would like to thank you for joining us today for our webinar, The Recipe for Leadership Success. I'm Janet Nelson, Director of Library Engagement for Demco, and I'll be moderating today's session. Before we begin the program, I wanted to go through some housekeeping details, and then I'll introduce our speaker, and she can start today's presentation. On your screens, you should see a chat box on the right-hand side. If you have a question or are having any type of technical issue, please feel free to type something there, and we'll do our best to get back to you as quickly as we can. We'll be taking questions in the middle and at the end of the session, so if something comes up that you would like clarification on or want to respond to, you can type it into the chat box. We'll be compiling all of your thoughts and questions and can address them in the middle and at the end of the presentation. If we don't get to your question during the session, we'll be sure to get answers and post them with the recorded webcast after the event. There is also specific contact information available for Kathy and myself that you should see on your screen as well. After the session, you can feel free to email us directly if you have specific questions that we may be able to help with. We are also using Twitter today, and the hashtag is #DemcoIdeas. You should be able to see that hashtag on the side of your screen in the chat box. We are monitoring that feed as well for questions and comments. Just for fun, while I'm doing introductions, we're going to pop up a poll question on your screen to help us better understand today's audience. And our question is, how long have you been in a leadership role at a library? You can take a look at the options and let us know. Now on to introductions. As I mentioned, I'm Janet Nelson, the Director of Library Engagement for Demco, and I am moderating today's session. At Demco, we're always interested in better ways to serve the needs of our customers, and these webinars have really been a great way for us to connect and provide additional information around important topics for evolving libraries. We're all aware that strong leadership skills are more essential than ever in today's libraries. In addition, it is important to continue to refine those skills and find new ways to lead that adapt to changes in the expectations of the library and the staff. I'm pleased to introduce to you Kathy Hockala-Osberg, who will be our speaker. Kathy is a library administrator, advocate, speaker, and trainer who believes the future of our libraries depends on our attitudes towards innovation services. She is currently the Executive Director of the Northeast Ohio Regional Library System and a 31-year public library veteran. She also serves as an adjunct faculty member for Kent State University's School of Library and Information Science and is the principal consultant for Libraries Thrive Consulting. As a frequent speaker and trainer at national and state conferences, staff days, and workshops, she has a passion for supporting, coaching, and developing successful libraries, staff members, and leaders. She has been a contributor and guest editor for ALA Professional Association's Library Work Life, and her books Be a Great Boss, 1 Year to Success, and Build a Great Team are available from ALA Editions. Her third book, Renew Yourself, Energize Your Career at Any Stage, is due out in 2016, so you can be watching for that. Before I turn this over to Kathy, I just wanted to show our poll results. It looks like most of you have been in your roles for 1 to 5 years, so that's great. I think you can learn a lot today in the session. By the end of the session, you will have a new understanding of what you can do to improve your leadership skills. So Kathy, we're going to put the controls into your capable hands, and you can get started when you're ready.
Thank you very much, Janet. I appreciate that. I'm just going to shift over to the PowerPoint here. Thank you very much for attending, all of you. It's exciting to see so many new people in positions of leadership. And as I always do when I start any kind of supervisory training, I want to start by congratulating you, because truly to be put into and trusted with a position of leadership where you have now control over other people's career development and their success, and in some cases their work life, is truly a privilege. As you know, I'm sure, leaders make a difference. Now, more than once you've been promoted into this position, your job is going to be more than books or budgets or time cards or any of the other tasks or duties you've had assigned to you. Your life is now all about people. And those staff members are waiting for you. They're hoping that you're going to bring ideas and motivation. They're trusting that you're going to provide the kind of support that they need and that you're going to build the kind of workplace where people want to get up in the morning and they want to come to work. It's a wonderful opportunity, and I truly believe that it is a privilege for any of us who've been able to have these positions. As you know, the impact of leadership can be great or it can be not so great. Often I find brand new supervisors are overwhelmed, thinking they have so much to learn. And I tell them the same thing I'll tell you today. There's really a very simple recipe to making yourself a successful leader. I'm going to get you started today, or for those of you who've been in leadership positions for a while, hopefully I'll give you some ideas to help you refocus or maybe re-energize. But the simplest thing to remember is that there's really only one thing to know, and that is that leadership is all about people. If you think back a little bit and remember some evocative memory that you have, we're using the analysis here, or of cooking and of recipes. So I'm thinking about my grandmother's cooking and some of the things that I think about when I remember her. Work situations can bring back really, really, really important memories in the same way. Think just for a minute about the very best supervisor, the very best boss you ever had. What does that make you remember about how you felt about being at work, about your career? You know what, if you don't mind, as you're thinking about this, go ahead and type into the text box, how did you feel working for that wonderful supervisor, that person whose leadership inspired you and made you feel confident and motivated? What else did it make you feel that you have that were so, so good? And text some of them in the text box so that we can all see the kinds of things that you're thinking of. Alternately, I'd like you to think, unfortunately, about the experiences that you had with some of the not so positive bosses. How did that make you feel as far as really wanting to be at work, wanting to try something new, wanting to make a difference, or feeling like you even had the potential to make a difference? Think back to those memories, both positive and negative, and what that does is it really reminds you again of the incredible opportunity you have to make a significant difference in people's lives. As I said, this is more now than just moving books around. Not that any of the work we had before our leadership positions were not valuable or not important, because certainly they were, but now we've been elevated to a position where we can create these memories. We're going to be the people that our staff are going to be remembering years from now. And I'm sure that you will join me in hoping that those memories are going to be the good ones and the ones that really make a difference in people's career. As Janet said, remember that as we go through this presentation, you'll have ideas or thoughts or comments or questions. You can go ahead and type those into that chat box anytime you want. Those are going to be monitored by Janet, and hopefully I'll be able to answer some of them as part of the presentation, and others I'll be able to answer in writing afterwards. So don't hesitate to send in and type up any kind of questions you might have. So I'm approaching new supervisor training in kind of a brand new way, and I'm thinking that as a recipe it has two parts. You have your ingredients and you have your directions, and leadership is a lot like that. You have to have your knowledge, but then you have to have an ability to apply that knowledge. It isn't enough to just learn the rules and learn the duties and learn the responsibilities, but you have to think about how you're going to implement them and how you're going to put them into practice to affect the lives of your staff. I don't want to discuss the obvious here, but I want to take a kind of a big picture look at the kind of exciting ingredients that you're going to run across. First of all, think about all those things you know. You do know about reference work, you know about resources, you know how to do collection development, and perhaps you were great at budgeting or schedules. Those things are really important, and as I said before, I don't mean to minimize their value at all, but I do want to emphasize that they have fallen into second place now under all of the things that you do to affect people. But as ingredients go, those skills that got you the job, that got you promoted, Those are an important ingredient to your success as a leader. But still are the things that you don't know, the things that are going to be popping up when you have a perfectly normal day scheduled and you know just what you're going to be working on and you've got just enough time to meet all your deadlines. Those things that you don't know about are going to pop up. Maybe they're going to be emergencies. Maybe they're going to be health issues. Maybe they're going to be really weird things like an employee tells you that she has a stalker and you have to find a way to deal with that. Believe me, if you spend any time at all sitting in a room with the experienced supervisors, they can regale you with stories of these things you don't know and you don't expect into the wee hours. They're just absolutely endless. And those also are going to be an ingredient and a part of the days that you have in your leadership position. Some of these situations are unimaginable, but every single person I know who has lived through these, even when they've happened at times when they felt very new and inexperienced, they've been able to pull together, again, those abilities that got you promoted to the position in the first place and deal with them. Sometimes they're horrible situations of people passing away suddenly. Sometimes they're just unusual situations that impact your work, like when the governor cut your budget by 33%. But all of these things need to be recognized by supervisors as things that are going to happen. It's going into the position with your eyes open that's going to help to build your confidence and kind of steady your hand when you do have to deal with these things. Some of them will be experiences that you just don't know about at all. Things that you're absolutely at a loss for. That's going to happen too. And what we're going to talk about is one of the most valuable things you can have as part of your recipe for success is a mentor or a coach. I recently had a panel do a presentation at a workshop talking about the one thing that they wish they had done differently in their career. And one of the more successful leaders in the group said, I missed so many opportunities to ask some wonderful people to be my mentor. And don't let that happen to you. When you run across people in your career, maybe in your library or other people's libraries, ask them, will you be somebody I can call? It isn't a commitment that you have to have lunch every Wednesday for the next 30 years. Just asking somebody, can I call you sometime when I get stuck? I can't imagine anybody who would say no to that. Most people would be incredibly flattered to be asked. But that's going to be the ingredient that you have in your back pocket to deal with those experiences that you have that you've never had before and the knowledge that you just don't yet have accumulated. Coaches and mentors are going to be the answer that you're going to need at that time. And luck is something also we're going to talk about more than once today. But remember that luck is not just happenstance. Luck, as my friend or my favorite author, Irma Bombeck, once said, is the intersection of preparation and opportunity. But you have to consider it as part of that every day you're going to have as a boss because it's going to come into play. The good news is in the directions. What do you do with all those ingredients? Well, I hope you're going to approach your job with a positive, happy, even to an extent a fun-loving approach, because truly if we don't enjoy our work, then we're in the wrong business. And especially with the additional challenges that you're going to face in leadership, you have to be in a job that you really like. And you're going to be able to be successful because of the directions that are listed on this screen. You obviously have a commitment to your work and to your staff, a continuation to growing and learning and building new skills, which again you obviously have or you wouldn't be on this webinar today. Taking risks, making mistakes, and having fun are all going to be part of your job, as are innovation, moving forward, and learning and sharing, and eventually becoming the same kind of mentor that you're looking for now. So I hope that's a positive recipe. I hope that's something that's making you encouraged that you took this job in the first place and that you can help to build the kind of skills that you need. You have to understand that it's going to be a process And the most successful leaders I've ever seen are the ones who are in those workshops after 30 years in a library because they still want to get better and better. Janet shared with me some of the responses that you put down when you signed up for this webinar. And so many of you, hundreds of you, said, I just want to keep building my leadership skills. And that's what this kind of a recipe and the things we're going to talk about over the next few minutes I hope will help you to do. One of the things you're going to recognize as you move forward is that there's always going to be gaps. Sometimes you're going to be blindsided by them. You're not going to even realize that there's an area specific that you're not really all that great at, or that maybe you didn't handle that as best you could. But that's okay. Looking for those gaps and recognize them is going to be something that's going to really move your dedication to lifelong learning forward. In all the comments that I read when you signed up, in addition to wanting to build those skills, many of you said that you wanted to be able to always recognize opportunities to do new and different things. So when you find these gaps, these are going to be the chances that are offered to you to make yourself a better leader. One of the things to keep in mind is to always focus on your strengths and manage your weaknesses. And that's something that's shared over and over in lots of different books and publications. There's some great YouTube presentations about this that you could look for. But remember, those strengths are things that strengthen you. Those are the parts of your job that you really enjoy. Focus on those. Keep making them stronger and better. Maybe you love public speaking. Maybe that's the one thing that just truly energizes you. If you really focus on that and you do a lot of that, then you're going to be building up your strength and building up your ability to manage those weaknesses that are also part of your job, but may not be things that actually keep you motivated and keep you driven. Manage those weaknesses by controlling them, by learning more, by building skills in those areas so that they too can become strengths. But keep yourself energized above all else. I think probably one of the biggest hurdles that I see new supervisors, new directors all around the country running into is burnout. They throw themselves into things that they're not good at. They avoid or don't pay enough attention or time to the things that they truly enjoy. They try to do everything at once, all alone, and they end up getting burned out. So that's a really important thing to realize, is those gaps are things to recognize and to work on, but they're just a tiny part of really, really taking care of yourself and making sure that your strengths are keeping you healthy. So you're going to think about how many gaps you have now. Well, I don't know this and I don't know that. I sat on the airplane next to a brand new library director once, right out of library school, and she was listing all the parts of her job that she didn't know anything about. And the more she listed it and talked about it, the more nervous she became. But what I suggested to her is, you know, in a larger big picture sense, just pick one. I'm going to talk a lot about focus and a lot about planning, but pick something that is one of the more critical gaps you have and focus your training on that for a period of time. I used to do it for a year at a time. Public speaking was one of the things that I addressed 1 year. I took as many workshops as I could on it. I read all about it. I talked to coaches and mentors about it. I really spent a significant amount of time focusing on it because it was a really important part of my new leadership role. And I truly felt like at the end of that year, I had closed that gap enough that I could turn my attention to my next gap that I really wanted to address. It sounds kind of like a cheap trick, but it really does work to help us to realize that we can't do everything all at one time. No matter how long you have been in a leadership position, you're still going to have a lot to learn. And you're going to be much more effective at building your own confidence if you can pick something and not expect instant answers or instant growth, but really dedicate yourself to getting better at it and building that skill over time. One of the things about the books that I wrote that Janet mentioned is that both of my 1 year at a time books, Build a Great Team and Be a Great Boss, They're both based on the premise that you need to spend at least 1 hour a week focusing on developing a skill in a certain area. And that's another way to approach it. The dean of the library school who taught a class to me back in the 80s once said to us that if you want to be effective managers and you can't find 1 hour a week to close your door and just get some learning and some growing done, then you're going to be in a lot of trouble. So that's one of the things to think about when it comes to gaps. You'll have a lot of little ones. You're going to have to, put your finger in the dike for many different things. I'm not saying that you can ignore everything but one topic. But for those bigger gaps that you've identified, spend some focused time and some strategic energy in really addressing those. And believe me, over the years as they go by, you're going to realize that you have really made a difference in your abilities and your skills. Another thing to consider is damage control. Again, I know I'm beating up the recipe metaphor. I apologize. But that's just what I've done here. Because my daughter used to use the smoke detector as a timer when she made cookies. So that's what made me think of the smoke coming out of the oven. But you will make mistakes, and that's a really good thing. I took one of my kids to the pediatrician when they were, I don't know, toddlers, 2 or 3, and when we got there, he had, I don't even know how many Band-Aids on, and I apologized to the pediatrician. I was so embarrassed, and I said, I'm really sorry that, he seems so beat up, but he's a pretty active little boy. And the doctor said to me, if you brought a toddler into my office who wasn't covered with Band-Aids, I would say you were a bad mother because you weren't letting the child explore as much as you should. And I would suggest a similar concept to new leaders and new supervisors. If you don't make some mistakes, if you don't have some damage to repair, then that means you're not taking enough risks. You're not being innovative enough. You're not taking enough chances and really trying to grow and develop your strengths. You're playing it too safe, and you're probably not going to be as effective as you could ultimately be. But my very best director, the best boss I ever had, taught me about damage control in a supervisory capacity. And what she said was, if you try something, you do something, you make a decision, and it turns out to be wrong, because, what new supervisor's training cannot contain this? We're all going to make mistakes. She said, you just make sure you keep your damage control in order. Number one, you think of people. And in the case of public libraries, or any libraries for that matter, you think of customers. So any kind of decision or action or anything that's happened that might have been wrong, the first thing we do is think about damage control for our customers. The second thing is our staff. How can we talk to our staff, and how can we make things better, and how can we learn from what whoever did wrong did wrong? I think it was Bear Bryant who said to his football team, now I'm going to quote this from memory so it won't be perfect. He said something like, if something goes sort of right, we all did it. No, if it goes sort of right, I did it. If it goes really right, you did it. You're going to give away the credit and you're going to take the blame for things if you're a really strong team leader, and that's what your focus is in developing your team. When I was in a supervisory position for the very, very first time, I had 3 people in my department, and my first week on the job, one of my staff members got into a horrible shouting argument with a customer. They were calling each other names and swearing at each other. It was terrible. Another customer actually called the police. So the branch manager was there, and it was just a great big mess. And I stood there thinking, I made the wrong decision. I never should have taken the supervisor's job. Now look at the mess I've made. My branch manager is probably just going to fire me. So when everything calmed down and the police and the customer had left, the manager said, Kathy, can you come into my office for a minute? And I thought, okay, this is it. Went into her office, and she closed the door and turned around and looked at me, and she said, what should we do? And I couldn't believe that she was not mad at me for making mistakes, not mad at me for what happened, not immediately blaming me or throwing me under a bus, but actually trusting in me and having the confidence in me to ask me what my opinion was on what to do. And then she followed her own advice. The first thing we talked about was the customer, and I suggested different ways to apologize, to contact the customer, etc. And the second thing she asked me was, well, what should we do about the staff member? And she was the one who then introduced me to the idea that the goal of discipline is not punishment, it's improvement. And so together we worked with the staff member to talk about how it could have been handled and, all of those things that you probably know. So after people, customers first and then staff, her damage control suggestion was stuff. Do you have to fix something with your computer or your books or change a program time or whatever? The most important lesson that I learned that I wanted to share with you today is that anything can be fixed. And truly no amount of damage that we can do is so bad that we should never try anything. Our staff members, our libraries, and our communities are counting on us to not just control the situation as leaders, but to grow our libraries and to surprise people with new services that they never even imagined, and to inspire staff members to feel more motivated about their work than they ever thought they could about a job. In order to do that, we have to make sure that we're not afraid of any kind of failure. If you haven't yet read this book, I would suggest you read a book called Ideas Are Free. It's by Robinson. It's right in front of me. I keep it on my desk. Alan Robinson, Ideas Are Free. One of the things that he talks about is the value of leaders who encourage their staff members to have ideas, to try things, to admit mistakes. I think one of his chapters or one of his comments is called Fail Fast. So if somebody comes to you with an idea and you go ahead and try it, something goes wrong, you do your damage control and you move on and try something else. That is an incredibly uplifting and supportive leadership action to take, and I can assure you that your staff is going to feel totally energized by knowing that what they have to think about and what they have to share is going to matter. So sharing everything that you do and accepting their mistakes, admitting your own mistakes and letting them see that it's okay to make them is going to be a huge benefit to any of the supervisory skills that you're building and to the feeling that your staff has to wanting to work for and follow you. Remembering also, as I just said, working with your staff, sharing with their innovations, their ideas, their mistakes, and being together on that page is more important to new leaders than anything else. Work as a team. Build a team in your library. Being together with the best people you can surround yourself with is probably going to be a key or the key to the success of your leadership experience and your career. Not only being a mentor to your staff, but thinking about your team as including the mentors you have asked to help you is just going to build a strong group of people that are going to make your job easier and that are going to make you look even better. Somebody once said a really, really good leader is someone who just has the key to the building, because all they have to do is open the door, and the wonderful people that they've chosen to surround themselves with are going to do all the rest of the work, and it's going to be amazing. Let me give you another suggestion of a book to read if you haven't already, and that is Good to Great by Jim Collins. It's actually not the full Good to Great. It's a smaller monograph called Good to Great for the Social Sectors. And in that book, he talks about someone who interviewed a woman named Frances Hasselbein, and you see her picture here. She did a TEDx event. Frances Hasselbein was CEO of the Girl Scouts of America, which is an enormous, as you know, an enormous organization. And she was at lunch, which is why I have this picture of a table, in case you're wondering. She was at lunch with the reporter one day, and the reporter said, "Mrs. Hasselbein, how do you feel being on top of such an enormous organization?" And she began rearranging all of the dishes and the silverware on the table where they were having lunch. And she put a glass or something in the middle, and she put silverware around it in a circle, and glassware around that in a circle, and plates around that in a circle. And by the time she had finished, she said to the reporter, all of this on the table, this is the organization, and this is me. And she pointed to the item in the very center. She said, I'm not at the top of anything. I am in the center of a rich organization. That's a kind of leadership tip that I certainly feel like belongs in all of our recipe books for us to remember, surrounding ourselves with fabulous people, not just our staff, but our coaches and our mentors as well. But back for just a minute to what I mentioned earlier on under the topic of the things you know. We still have to develop our own skills as well. Sometimes when I'm working with a library that's called me in because they're having some challenges, especially with their team, one of the things I'll find out through conversation is I'll ask the leadership, can you give me a list of the most recent training events you have been to? And they'll say to me, oh, none of the managers go to any training events. We don't have that much money for training. We just send our staff. And this is a real problem with leadership. Leadership is a growing thing. It's a living thing. It is a situation that has to be continually nurtured and developed. All of those KSAs, those knowledge, skills, and abilities that got you the job have to be continually developed by you. I really can't think of any more important single tip to give new leaders than to keep finding ways to learn. Now, I know a lot of people right now are thinking, but we really don't have money for training. But as you know, because you work in a library, this doesn't necessarily mean you have to take college classes or spend a lot of money on tuition. You have wonderful resources such as Demco that provide free training and webinars. There are lots of other opportunities for online learning. TEDx, some of the TEDx presentations I use over and over in workshops because they're so great. There's untold books that you can read, blogs, online material, etc. But all of those basic knowledge, skills, and ability need to be continually built. And in addition, you want to make sure that you're building your other skills, your EQ, your emotional intelligence skills, such as the ones that I have listed on this slide. Paying attention to both our practical and our emotional selves is going to help us develop ourselves into the kinds of leaders that can be trusted to deal with any kind of a situation. You remember back in the very beginning slide when I talked about things you don't know, experiences you've never had. You're going to be preparing yourself to deal with those by keeping your technical skills sharp and by continuing to develop a strong attitude, positive attitude. Keeping a vision, sharing a vision with your staff, being respectful, and all of the categories that I have listed here beside this slide. Those are the things that can help us make a positive difference in people's lives. And I don't know about you, but that's why I took the job. So let me talk for just a minute about strategy. I mentioned before, strategy is a really, really important thing for leadership. This is a multitask position. This is a many-faceted position. I've already told you of many, many things you need to be doing to build skills, but in the meantime, you're at work every day, and you've got lots and lots of demands facing you. So you want to make sure that you can be a successful leader. You need to come up with a strategy that will help you focus your energy, and you need to commit to that strategy. The first thing I would suggest you do, if you haven't done it already, is clarify expectations and goals with your supervisor. Don't assume that you can just keep moving in a job in the same pattern as someone whose position you're filling. Don't assume that you know that your old boss liked it when you did X, Y, and Z, so this new boss is just going to have to like it too. But spend that time to sit down with your supervisor and clarify, what does she or he expect from you? What do they want to see happen this year? What kind of goals should you have? Shockingly, to me, lots of libraries don't have strategic plans, and lots of libraries don't do evaluations. I imagine they all have good reasons, but I, for one, think that from a leadership standpoint, that's like trying to drive a car on two tires. But making sure, if you can, to talk to your supervisor to get those at least for you is going to help you to not only know what success will look like, but to reach it. So who do you talk to? How often can you meet with your supervisor? What's going to happen if you make a mistake? What kind of flexibility and damage control and growth and room for growth is there in your organization? Thinking about this is just as kind of an important second element to what I've talked about all up to this point, which has been you dealing with the people you supervise. But as a leader, in order to know that you are successful and that you're on the right path and that you can feel supported and encouraged and motivated, you need to find out what your supervisor needs from you too. And it's worth whatever amount of time the two of you can spend to design some kind of a focused strategy that you can both commit to and that you can grow towards and build skills to meet. I want to stop for just a minute at this point before I talk a little bit more about modeling and see if, Janet, there have been any questions that have been submitted.
Yes, Kathy, I do have a question. This question comes from a school librarian, and it is, how do you work with a staff member who doesn't want your help?
Well, I guess I'm going to have to assume the staff member is someone you supervise, and if I'm wrong with that, you can retext to Janet and let me know. But if the person is someone that you supervise, and they obviously need some kind of redirection, but they just aren't accepting it from you, I think you have to go back and start from scratch with them. I think you have to sit down and establish some ground rules for the relationship that you're going to have. And you can start that by talking about the different roles and the different goals and expectations for both of your jobs. I would say to someone I supervise that I am evaluated on and I am paid to make sure that the people I supervise can be totally successful at their jobs so that the organization can achieve its goals. That's my job. That's my focus. That's what I care about. That's why I'm here. But I do have to make sure that areas that need correcting get corrected. I want to work with my staff. I want to make sure that suggestions I have for changes are things with which they're comfortable. I want to listen to their ideas too for improvement. But together as a team, we can't look away from issues that need to be resolved. We need to work together to resolve them. And I guess I would just make sure that those ground rules were really, really clear. And then I would try to listen and hear as many ideas and as much input as I could from them and work with them, even if that meant that I had to lighten up on or, loosen up on some of the ideas that I may have had. I want to be open to what's going to work with them, at least to get started. But they have to understand that as a supervisor, you can't look away when things need to be corrected. You got to find a way to work together to do so.
That's great advice, Kathy. I love how positively that is framed too. It makes it a lot easier to talk through it and kind of get that idea across. So at this point, we don't have any other questions, but as people get them, please text them in and we can follow up with any others at the end, and we can just proceed on with the rest of the presentation now.
Okay, well, I want to talk a little bit more about modeling and growth and learning because, again, I think those are so key to whatever position you have, but certainly a position of leadership. If you think about it, I'm sure you can think of some people that you have known in your professional career that you have thought, boy, I want to be just like that person. Now, this may or may not be the favorite boss you thought about before. It might be someone else that you've run across in your career. The person who had a really big impact on me and the way that I work was a professor of mine who taught our statistics class in library school. This was a really complicated, incredibly demanding class. As a matter of fact, the evening of my first class, I believe I cried. It was just so overwhelming. I couldn't believe the work involved. And yet, I got an A in the class because this woman was so professional and so organized. Every single week, she presented us with about a half-inch thick packet of paper that had like an outline of our lecture and assignments and expectations and resources. I mean, I've just never seen anything so organized in my life. And I would like to think that she has been a role model to the way I work, because clarity and professionalism and organization have been the way I've approached all of my leadership positions. So I guess I want to just remind you to think about the examples that you've had, and think about the bad examples that you've had as well as the good ones, and make sure that you're realizing that you are now a model for other people. People are looking towards you. They're looking towards you to see what kind of a culture, a work culture you have in your library, and they're looking towards you to see how they can build their skills, how they can achieve their goals, how they can enjoy their job. That's a really big responsibility. I know, as I have, and probably many of you have had too, I've had some bosses and supervisors who were incredibly moody. I mean, most of their focus was on themselves, on their own feelings and opinions. If they were in a lousy mood, then the whole day at work went poorly. And now that I've had a chance to reflect more on how to be a strong leader, I realize how they had the whole thing backwards, how they really needed to realize that we were all depending on them to model the way and show us and mentor us so that we could grow and be positive. If you have a negative attitude, if you have a negative approach to your work, then that's something you need to resolve early on so that you're not modeling that kind of behavior for your staff. You also want to make sure that you realize people are watching you. You're teaching them whether you're doing this formally or not. People are learning from you, and they're learning from the way that you work. They're seeing if you're taking those risks that we talked about. They're seeing if you like and you're excited by new ideas, new innovations, new ways to try things. We've all had those leaders in the past in our positions who say, you know what, we've always done it this way, it's always worked for us, we're not going to change. And we know how sometimes suffocating that can feel, especially as we change members of our team and people bring in their new ideas. That can sometimes make a person feel kind of squelched and stopped right from the beginning. So we want to make sure that since we know people are watching us, we're showing them that they should innovate, they should welcome challenge, they should take risks, they should share those ideas, and those are the kinds of things that as their leaders we're going to support. You can see, I hope, that as I've kind of gone through all of these slides, there's really not a whole lot of nuts and bolts to being a really great supervisor. I think there's nuts and bolts to being a leader, but to be a great leader, it's really all about realizing the impact and the opportunity that you have to be positive around other people. Remember again, and I'm putting this back in only because I truly wanted to emphasize this, be willing to try those new things even if you don't know exactly how it's going to work and whether or not it's going to be a mistake or not. And of course, risks are only comfortable if they're calculated risks. That's where all those other KSAs that I mentioned, those other knowledge, skills, and abilities come in. You're listening to these ideas, and if there's a red flag or 2 or 3 of them, you're going to be able to temper the idea with your experience and your knowledge, but never squelch the idea or the opportunity to just have an idea and say it out loud. So you're going to be able to try new things, to assume responsibility for them as the leadership role person, and to admit that something might need to be corrected and to move on. But probably one of the least creative and the most destabilizing things that a leader can do is to just leave everything the same for fear of making a mistake or changing something for the worst. As I said when I first started talking, your staff is waiting for you. They're hoping that you're going to try new things. They're depending on you to make them want to come to work in the morning. And this is an opportunity for you to really be open to their ideas. Lots of times new directors will come back to me and say, when I opened up these opportunities and when I had my staff read Ideas Are Free, all of a sudden, all these ideas came pouring forward. And I said to them, how come you have so many ideas so quickly? And they said, oh, we've been saving them up because never before has anybody asked us to share them. So as they say about librarians, don't let perfect get in the way of good. Be the kind of leader that's willing to be wrong. And most importantly, enjoy your job. One of my favorite directors once said to me, when I'm not having fun anymore, it's time to go home. And I don't mean to be flippant or to take the job too lightly. And no, that's not me with the book cart, by the way. I wouldn't have been able to do that for about the past 15 years. But we have to be able to enjoy our job. None of the other things that I've mentioned that make a strong leader can be credible or real if we're not happy in our work. We can't be innovative, we can't be excited, we can't be creative if we're not enjoying our jobs. And you know what they say about the culture of a workplace. Well, I always say a fish stinks from the head down, but that's kind of an indelicate way to put it. When you walk into any organization, you can feel the work culture before you even talk to anybody who works there. You could think of the driver's license office, some of the other places where you know that you hate to go. Or you can think of places like Disney World, where most people love to go because you can feel the work culture when you walk through the door. The same thing is true of your department or your branch or your library. If you as a leader aren't feeling all of these things, then that's going to trickle down to everyone on your staff, and a lot of what you put your money and your energy towards to improve the workplace is just flat out not going to work. There's lots of information out there now on good health, on the dangers of sitting too long. At our organization, we just recently, one of the staff members brought forth an article on the dangers of sitting, and so we've instituted walking meetings. Now, I know everybody doesn't have the same opportunities, and maybe in a public library setting, of course, you can't do that. But anything you can come up with that you're willing to try to help people to be physically more comfortable, more healthy. We long ago gave up on the donuts at the meeting, and we take turns trying to come up with healthy alternatives. Anything we can do to demonstrate to the people who depend on us that we care about them, including caring about their health, is a very, very positive thing. And again, making a difference by encouraging them to grow, to learn, to maybe even change jobs. One of the steps that I always include when I do evaluations is when I get to the end and I talk about goals, I try to talk about them in two ways. First of all, what are your goals in this job for the coming years so that I can help the staff be successful? But secondly, what are your other goals? What do you want to do? Do you want to be a director someday? Do you want to be a legal librarian? What are you hoping to do as your career moves forward, and how can I help with that as well? One thing I don't think anyone who's ever worked with me would say is that I would want somebody to not get a promotion because I'd hate to lose them, and I'd have to replace them, and oh, what a hassle that would be. On the contrary, look for opportunities and make sure your staff knows that your interest is in their growth and their development and them reaching their dreams and their goals too. I had somebody say to me once, yeah, but if I get that new job, then you're going to get stuck having to replace me. And I said, that's my job. That's why I'm here. And if every single person on my staff was promoted, I wouldn't feel like, oh no, I've got all this work to do. I would feel like, boy, I must have done a pretty good job encouraging people and helping them to grow because they were all able to be promoted. So that's a really important part of that positive work culture that I'm trying to talk about. It's not all just fun and games. It's not all just dancing around book carts. There's a lot of components to it, but most of us as just human beings, we know what it feels like to be happy at work, to enjoy a workplace, and to be encouraged and know that people value us. Now let me just say before I go on that there's a difference between what I've been talking about and a leader assuming responsibility for morale. When I have staff members in the past who have come to me and said, you know, I'm concerned about something. Staff morale right now is really low. I think you should do something about it. I have always responded the same way. with complete honesty and conviction, I tell them I do not feel responsible for staff morale, for whether or not my staff is happy. What I do feel responsible for as a leader is creating a comfortable, encouraging, healthy, motivating workplace. And once I've done that, that's my job as a leader. Whether or not the people who work in that workplace are happy is their responsibility. So I ask you not to confuse those two things, because if you go forth in your career as a leader thinking that your major responsibility is getting everybody happy, you're going to be probably a very, very frustrated individual. So I talked a lot about mentoring and about change and about being open to innovation. And for those of you who don't know what this is a picture from a movie called Desk Set, which if you haven't seen it, you need to see it, because it's all about being afraid of something that's new and having it make your life be better rather than worse. But I've spent a lot of time talking about your mentors, and I want to talk now for just a second about you being a mentor. Because as far as I'm concerned, another really, really big job of leaders everywhere is to build more leaders. So make sure that you're always looking for those attributes, those attitudes, those interests that your staff members show, and you know who they are. You can probably think of one or two people right now while I'm talking who fit that description. Think of those people who show that spark of interest in leadership and look for every opportunity you can find to develop it in them and to encourage and motivate them. I've never been a fan of real precise succession planning, you know, the kind where I say I'm going to promote you in 5 years, because 5 years from now, who knows what might have happened. But building those skills in people so that they're promotable and supporting and encouraging other people's interest in leadership is, I believe, a big part of our job. And some of it, as we've talked about, is going to be very passive, and it's going to be part of them just watching you and seeing what you're modeling. But there has to be some active participation on our part too, making sure that the next time you have a project, don't just take the project on yourself automatically, but think, you know what, I noticed so-and-so in this department has really seemed to indicate an interest in and an aptitude, an ability for leadership. I'm going to ask her if she would like to chair a task force to take on this project. Maybe you don't even really need a task force for the project, but nonetheless, it is an opportunity to grow those leadership skills. Or if you're putting together a committee that normally you would chair, see if you can think of somebody else you can give that opportunity to and have them report back to you or keep you in the loop so that you know what's happening. Somebody once told me that as a leader, the more power you give away, the more effective leader you are, because you're building other leaders who are going to come along behind you. And I don't think there's anything much more important than we can do than that. Looking to the future, we're going to have lots of opportunity for openings for new leaders. If we, as the current leaders, don't take an avid interest in that and we don't realize how important it is for us to grow those people, then we're going to have a huge void of leadership in America's libraries, and I don't think any of us really want to see that. So let your staff know that you care about their future. Let them know that you care about and you support their dreams, and give them the opportunity to try those new assignments and to move into those new roles and to find ways to become just as great of a leader as all of us hope that we can be. If you remember before, I mentioned one of my favorite quotes, and okay, Irma Bombeck didn't say it first, a Roman philosopher said it first. But good luck is truly the intersection of preparation and opportunity. And I hope for all of you that, combined with your obvious commitment to be great leaders, you have a lot of luck and a lot of success in your career. And Janet, I did manage to save about, let's see, almost 10 minutes here towards the end, so I'm wondering if there have been any other comments, or if anybody has any comments or questions that they'd like to type in right now, or just anything that this topic has made you think of that you want to share. We do have some time.
Okay, Kathy, we do have some questions, and again, keep those questions coming, and we'll make sure we get them answered, even if we can't do them out loud here. So the first one is, how do you correct negative behaviors in staff that have been carried over from past supervisors?
Well, that's a great question. Actually, excuse me, I do a training called If It's Broke, Fix It. Because a lot of times when somebody's getting ready to leave or retire, they look around and they see these big problems that they've ignored for a long time, and they think, you know what, I'm going to let the other guy fix this. So you come in as a new supervisor and you see things that have been going on for a long time. And I think it's a pretty easy thing to approach, because I think one of the first things you should do, as I've said earlier, is you've got to get your staff together and you've got to say, okay, look, let's talk about some ground rules that we can all agree on. Let's talk about the kind of workplace that we all want to have. I talked to a brand new director and helped her to do this in her place of business. And I said, get a flip chart, but don't write anything on it. Let your staff, let your team tell you what to write. Now, if you have things that you want on that list that they don't come up with, you can add them at the end, but let them go first. And she told me that her team said everything she wanted on that flip chart. They wanted people to be respectful. They wanted people to have a positive attitude. They wanted no whining, no cynicism, no rumors, all of those negativity. So you establish that as a supervisor. Even if you've been in your job 5 years, you can call a meeting and say, I don't know about you guys, but I am uncomfortable with the work culture here right now, and I think that as a team we need to do something about it. It doesn't have to be your first day on the job. You can start over any day, but get everybody involved in establishing those ground rules and having that conversation about why they're important, why they're going to create the kind of a environment that you can all be successful in. And then talk about consequences. I had a student in my management class say, you know, I never really wanted to be a manager because I don't like confrontation. And I said to her, what do you think we do? We don't. Leaders don't like confrontation, but we can't run from it either. So you take the time to establish those ground rules, and then you say, if these are violated, we're going to follow a disciplinary whatever. Do you have a disciplinary chart? Do you want to establish one? You probably, if you're lucky, you've got one. But you have to back that up. You have to call that person in and say, you might not be aware of this, but you've been acting, your performance has been very negative, and that's really contrary to the ground rules our team has agreed on. Now, I want you to be a positive contributor. You bring lots of great skill to this team, but you need to make a decision. If you want to stay on this team, you need to not let this happen again. I've always told supervisors, whether you're disciplining somebody, whether you're suspending them, whether you're firing them, you don't do it. They choose to do it. You always put it in a way that it's their decision. I'd like you to stay on this team and be a productive member, but you need to decide if you can follow these ground rules or not. You have to stand behind them once you've established them. But I think you can do that, and you can get a handle on that kind of behavior. Like I said, whether it's your first day on the job or you've been there for 10 years and you just want to call a meeting and say, enough.
I think that's great advice, Kathy. Good things for all of us to remember. I think we have time for one more question. So, does a good supervisor have to listen to a staff's personal problems, ask about their vacation, hear about the problems with their kids, etc.? Where is the line between getting work done and being empathetic?
Well, there is a line, and it's a very specific line, and it's there for a really, really good reason. Even if you are promoted from within and you're now supervising people with whom you used to go out for drinks or go to the game or go to the beach on the weekend, you can't do that anymore. You can go out for lunch with the whole staff or go to the beach with the whole staff, but you've got to draw a line with personal issues and friendship. When people want to talk to you about things like their divorce or their children or whatever, a supervisor should have the confidence to say, you know, I really value you as a staff member, but I'm sorry, I really don't feel comfortable getting on, having this personal level conversation, so I think we really should focus more on the business at hand. And again, when you're setting ground rules with people, even if you're doing it just one-on-one because you've got one person who wants to talk like that, that's another ground rule you can establish and you can explain. You know, it really isn't a good idea for us to have these personal conversations because I am the supervisor. So, you know, I know you have lots of other friends on the staff you can talk to, but I just don't want, I don't think that this is going to be appropriate in the future. So, you know, we'll just talk about business. You absolutely have to do that, because not only are you not going to get work done, but it's going to really be a problem if and when you do have to discipline the employee, or you have other people who think you're showing favoritism. You have to establish professional boundaries and explain them in a respectful way, and then you have to stick to them.
Great advice. So we're going to go ahead and wrap things up now. I think a lot of you have to get on to other things. So we'd like to thank Kathy for sharing her insights and ideas around the recipe for leadership success. We hope that everyone was able to take away a few new ideas to try, and there was some great discussion. We appreciate all of you sharing your time with us. You'll be receiving a survey at the end of the webinar to let us know how we did. Please take a few moments to fill this out. We'd love your feedback so that we can make these sessions even better in the future. Feel free to comment on other topics that you'd like more information on, or speakers you'd like to hear from, so we can consider building some of those things into our future schedule. We've received great feedback from our previous webinars that have really helped shape and focus the topics that you're most interested in. A recording of this webcast will be available on the Demco Ideas and Inspiration website by tomorrow. So if you missed something or you just want to review, you can go back and refresh yourself on the presentation or share with your colleagues. Next week, you'll be receiving an email that will include resources such as the slides, a list of Kathy's resource suggestions, and a Q&A log that documents and answers the questions that came up today. Thanks again for joining us. We're going to be taking a break from our webinar schedule for summer, but keep watching for upcoming webinars to start again in September. You can also check out the new Ideas and Inspiration site for webinars that are available on demand to watch at your convenience. We hope that you will consider joining us for future events. And again, so glad you joined us and hope you have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you.